If you played Elden Ring so far and didn't try out bow builds, well, you're really missing out on a ton of fun and some really excellent boss melting damage. Despite the shortcomings of this weapon category, bows can truly be devastating and oftentimes completely outclass even weapons that are normally considered god tier for most of the content. So that's why in today's video we're going to take a look at the highest damage viable endgame bow build for Elden Ring, so let's begin. Oh, and totally check out GOG.com using my links down below. They have some really crazy discounts right now, and you also get to play the games DRM free. Now this is going to be a quality build that makes use exclusively of bows and several buffs to reach that max damage potential and truly melt bosses. Specifically, the black bow, the Albinori great bow, and the Lion's great bow is what we're using with this build, all pretty much best in slot for their intended purposes. This means you're constantly going to try to take down enemies and especially bosses from really far away and unleash as much damage as possible before they can even reach you. Since you need quite a bit to make this work, you'll also spend a bit of time pre-buffing before major fights, but I did not find it to take too long, and the extra damage you get at the end of it more than makes up for any slight downtime. The build is quite high level, and the fights you're seeing in this video were filmed in New Game Plus, but you can start building towards it much sooner than that in your first playthrough. Now, because most of the bosses in Elden Ring have rather large hitboxes, this means you're going to have an excellent time unleashing both massive physical damage but also status build up, like for example bleed and frostbite, despite having minimal to no investments into arcane whatsoever. There's also an option for single target damage, and you can also pretty much go in uninterrupted, as this is all going to give you the possibility to shoot your arrows even when jumping or dodging away from incoming attacks. So let's begin then with the weapons, the first one being the black bow. This is found northeast of the Avenue Balcony side of Grace in Lane Dell, and despite being just a bow, it does use the jump and the dodge arrows shot attacks from the short bows. This allows you to jump and then immediately follow up with a much faster arrow shot upon landing, which is quite amazing since you're going to still want to dodge incoming attacks. And speaking of dodging, you can similarly dodge and then follow up with a shot. It's going to still be extremely fast, giving you an incredible uptime and DPS even when avoiding attacks. But most important, this does give you a very good weapon skill called the Barrage. This lets you shoot arrows continuously and a lot faster than normally, making it a perfect option for both damage and applying status effects. Whereas the black bow was more of a single target sort of option, the next one being the Albinori great bow is more centered towards AoE / large hitbox options. This is dropped by the Albinoric archers you can find in the consecrated snowfields, and this is a slightly better option than the basic longbow. Coupled with a rain of arrows as Chauveur, this is going to transform it into an incredible way of raining damage upon enemies' heads, especially ones with the large hitboxes. This ensures that all arrows hit, and this is basically the way to stack up the damage and also the status effects. Finally, we have another option, which is the Lion's great bow, rewarded from Radahn's Remembrance. This has a much higher base damage than any other bow in this build, and also one of the best weapon skills called Radahn's Rain. This is basically a much stronger variant than the Rain of Arrows Ash of War, so this is going to deal more damage. Furthermore, if you combine this with Radahn's Spears, you're going to get an extra 20% physical damage on top. This is basically the bow that you'll want if your enemies resist any of those status damages, or if you just want pure physical damage and extremely high numbers. On top of this, we use two more weapons, one of them being Commander's O'Neill Battle Standard. This isn't even required to be upgraded, and its special ability gives you a 20% damage buff for 30 seconds. And finally, we're going to make use of a weapon, any weapon that can use seppuku. The reason being is because the next two talismans are very important. We're going to make use of the White Mask plus the Blood Exaltation Talisman for an additional 30% damage for 20 seconds whenever there's blood loss in our vicinity. Of course, we can't make an arrow-centric build without also including the Arrow Sting Talisman for that extra 10% damage to arrow damage, and also a Shard of Alexander, a no-brainer for almost any build that makes use of weapon skills, which this one in particular does rely on quite a lot. Finally, the Axe Talisman was my option. It does affect the Rain of Arrows Ash of War, since that is considered a charged attack, so this buffs it for an extra 10% damage. There's other possible options in there too, including an Earth Tree Favor if you want some extra HP, stamina, and a bit more equip load, especially if you also aim to use the Lion's Great Bow that can be quite heavy. Or even a Blue Dancer if you feel adventurous and don't want to wear any clothes and go like low HP. This is going to give you a massive boost to damage, but only with very low equip loads, so do keep that in mind. In terms of the stats, as I've said, this is a quality build, so since most of the bows do get a descaling in both dex and strength, we're gonna use about 60 points into each of these at level 150, but you should push towards 80 above that. Now, since we do want a bit of survivability, I also went with the first soft cap of 40 into Vigor to get close to 1500 HP, and then anywhere between 25 to 27 for both Mind and Endurance, with maybe a slight favor towards Endurance since Barrage and Rain of Arrows tend to use that a little bit more. Now, in terms of the strategy, we do need to buff the damage as much as possible to truly melt bosses, which is why we'll start any fight with a Spiked Cracked Tear Physic Potion acquired from the Earth Tree Spirit in the Mistwood region. This buffs charge attacks by 15%, but it lasts for a whopping 3 minutes, which is why you're going to want to always start a fight with this one. After this, you're going to follow up with a Blood Boil Aromatic. It's craftable by acquiring the Perfumer Cookbook number 2 from the Shaded Castle, and it gives you a hefty 30% damage boost for 30 seconds, and it's kind of like a physic potion, so you only need to craft it once. And from this point on, we're gonna make use of the Seppuku plus the Commander's Standard for the final piece, and this is going to give us the full damage potential. This results in buffing your damage and unlocking that insane boss melting damage, completely destroying any boss in Elden Ring, or at the very least the high-end ones that I've tested. Whether you choose direct physical damage with Radahn's Lion's Great Bow or status build-up with the Albinoric one, nothing can stay on its feet in front of you for too long. This is why I heavily encourage you to use the Lion Great Bow against bosses that have high resistances towards status build-up, especially Bleed or Frostbite, and if they don't, yeah, you can totally switch to the Albinoric instead. Meanwhile, to finish things off against small fry enemies, or just if you want to get straight up damage, you can always go for the Black Bow to finish things off, and it's totally an amazing option. Keep in mind that this is still a quality build, so you have so many points into strength and dexterity that you can literally use melee weapons as well if you feel overwhelmed or if you don't get too many arrows. And speaking of arrows, there is a way to actually get an infinite number of these, and I'm going to mainly focus on the regular arrows and the bleed ones. For the normal arrows, you can buy an infinite amount of these. They deal great damage and you can find them early at the Church of Allah. They do cost some of those runes, but you will get them by the thousands by the middle of the game. Then if you want to have the bleed ones, you're going to need some thin beast bones and the blood roses, both of which can be bought and found infinitely. So for infinite thin beast bones, you will want to defeat the bell-bearing, well, night boss that spawns at the War Master's shack. This is going to only spawn during the night time. It's an invasion, and this is going to give you a bell bearing that you can bring at the Round Table Hold, and once you give it to the maidens, you're going to be able to buy an infinite amount of these thin beast bones. Meanwhile, if you're looking for an infinite source of those blood roses, you can find them right here at the Rose Church in the lake area. Pretty much take them, die, respawn at the statue, and then repeat the process until you get thousands, and then just craft as many of these arrows as you want. Anyway, on a final note, as I've said, this is a truly devastating build, but it doesn't come without weaknesses. The biggest one being the fact that it is quite reliant on having many of these buffs active, which means you have to be quite far into the game to fully unlock the potential of this build. Second of all, you do need to know those mechanics quite a bit and the boss fights in general to make the most out of the downtime when they don't attack, to properly position yourself and unleash unleash that maximum damage. But once you do get all of that going on, it's a very satisfying build to pull off, definitely worth a try, and definitely something that I've been playing a lot with in the past few days. Totally let me know down in the comments if you ever gave a bow build a try before, or if you played anything similar to this, or maybe even a better variant. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.